Here we are with Jenn Kennedy, Dr. Jenn Kennedy. So good to see you. I was just saying I miss your beach curls because you're all professional. You're not in your beachy
Yeah.
Costa Rica retreat
I had
self.
to give it over. I was like, okay, just let it be. And I have these crazy, natural curls that typically come out when I'm in warm weather. So it's kind of fun. It's like an alter, identity.
Yeah, you have to give it over. This is also part of having good sex, right? There's things you have to let go of
Good
and
point.
not be so put together all the time. And I was actually thinking about you. We had to reschedule this interview, and usually when a reschedule happens, I have a little yay moment where like, oh, I have an extra hour, yay. But when our reschedule happened, I had, oh no, I'm disappointed that we had to put this
Oh,
off. And that's also another indicator, when we are having good sex or we feel good in our sex life, we're disappointed when we don't get to have it. And when we are dissatisfied in our sex life, we're like, yay, I don't have to have it.
this was a takeaway that I had from the Costa Rica trip was that do the things that bring you joy and don't spend time with people you don't want to, right? So if you have some disappointment when you don't get to see somebody, that's an indication they matter to you. If you feel relief, maybe not so much. So yeah, I appreciate that.
So we're going to talk about, I think, female pleasure today. That's your specialty is pleasure, but also how it relates to just sort of our sex lives, our relationships. And I'm hoping that we can cover a lot that people can leave with some practical kind of tips and tools. I reached out to a number of people, so a variety of different people, my clients, my friends, to talk about sex and what are the questions that they would have for a sex therapist, you. But starting with that concept of pleasure, doing things that are pleasurable, your whole branding is about pleasure. So just tell us a little bit more about that and how it relates to sex.
Yeah. So, I mean, couples has always been my focus as a therapist. And I quickly realized that sex is part of coupleship and largely it goes unaddressed. A lot of therapists don't want to kind of go into that domain and it needs attention and it's a loaded issue. So I just sort of kept marching toward it. And then as I got more training, I realized oftentimes the presenting issue is female. I mean, it can also be coupleship. Certainly, I see a lot of men and I see a lot of heterosexual couples, but so often it's women. I find it's women coming in with low desire is like this front and center problem.
So what's contributing to that? Because that actually was some of the questions that people had. Some of the friends that I asked that were maybe have been in relationships for a long time,
Yeah.
they feel a desire. It kind of like, pokes his head out from time to time, an interest, a desire, an energy, but it doesn't
Yeah.
seem like it's happening in their relationship.
Yeah. Well, especially in longer term relationships, that desire can wane because there's familiarity. It gets kind of boring, it gets routine. Just that feeling of like it feels like an effort. Sometimes it can feel like a chore. So there starts to be like a lack of like real interest in that pursuit.
And what do you do about that? Like if there was a couple sitting in your office and one person saying, I want more sex, the other person saying, I'm just not interested. I guess what would be unwise effort on the part of that couple? And then what would be more wiser use of their energy and effort?
Well, unwise effort would look like coercion, would look like guilt, like you need to do this. This is what we agreed, or you owe me this, or that kind of thing. That does absolutely nothing for the partnership. So much of it is about what's going on here. So there has to be sort of a shift in energy relationally, I find. Sometimes there's a problem. Like sometimes, maybe one person's having vaginal dryness or erectile dysfunction, or there's stuff that's medically happening, and that feels like that needs to be addressed separately. But if it's relational, like oftentimes if they're carrying maybe resentment or resentment not even related to sex, resentment related to the relationship, those kinds of interpersonal dynamics are going to get in the way. And so those things are more traditional, just couples therapy of like, let's resolve some of that stuff so that you can get back to feeling playful and sensual and unguarded with this person, because that's the space you have to shift in to be in the erotic zone.
I think it was Esther Perel that I heard say that what happens in your bedroom is a metaphor for what's happening in your relationship. What plays out there, is that true? Is that
Yeah,
yeah.
it's like a microcosm of your bigger life. Now, there are exceptions to that. There are couples who are lovely and kind and supportive and getting along wonderful, and they feel no sexual desire. Like, yes, that can happen too, but oftentimes it is a microcosm. Like, if there's a power struggle in the day to day over parenting, over finances, over whatever, there is a power struggle in the bedroom too, right? It's not like you just lay all that aside and then suddenly your erotic self. You bring that in. This person has lots of touch points with you. So if you aren't resolving these other things, then it's likely to feel energetically present when you're in there erotically. You're an emotive human. So if you're having grief, or if you're having frustration, or if you're having stress, or if you're having trust issues, any of that stuff, it's going to come in and it's going to inhibit desire.
So I'm going to ask some of these specific questions because maybe you can give specific answers around them. One is just about that very question, which is how do you actually start to increase desire? Like it had it, if there's it, we're all so diverse, right? The things that are interesting to one person may be not interesting to another. Things that are
Yeah.
pleasurable to one person may not be pleasurable to another. But is there a starting place? Like say you are in one of those couples where one of the members wants it and then the other one wants to want it, but isn't wanting it.
Yeah.
Where would you even start? Like if they were on your couch, what assignments would you give them?
So I'm listening to how they're talking to each other. I'm looking at their energy exchange, but then also I will see them separately, because separately they're more likely to be really honest with me. And in that separate appointment, I hear, I don't like the sex we're having, or something about what they're doing kind of like grosses me out, or like there's
Yeah,
this
totally.
response, or avoidant. They're avoiding sex for some reason. I mean, there also might be biological stuff going on. If there's hormonal imbalances, that kind of thing, then there might just be low desire or blood pressure issues with that kind of thing. So we have to first, look at that. But if that stuff is known and then we're just in the partnership, then we're looking at, okay, so what's going on between you? What do you have any desire? Like I will say to the low desire partner, are you masturbating? Like, is there any sort of relationship to self? Do you have any sexual interest? If you do, okay, so then what's happening here? If you're just totally shut down, that's kind of like a different pathway. If you do have some interest, but you're not having a ton of interest for your partner, then let's reignite that. How to like introduce maybe some playfulness, whatever that looks like in your partnership, some banter, some, Sue Johnson is a big fan of like closeness and feeling very known and feeling very connected. Esther is more like tension breeds interest and fire. It's a little bit, they have kind of different philosophies
Well, I
about
think
that.
it's
And
both,
really,
isn't it? Isn't it both? It's closeness and
go look at who's sitting
yeah.
in front of me, because some coupleships, like the closeness, the woman especially often asks for a lot of conversation and wants some like connection first. Sometimes it's also about novelty, wanting to introduce something new. Let's go somewhere different, or let's wear something different, or let's bring in a toy, or let's try it on the kitchen table. Like let's mix it up a little bit. Maybe it's opening the relationship. There's different ways to also introduce novelty, which makes the brain go, what? What's going on right now? So if you just return to the same thing and it's not working, it's probably not going to change. Right? There needs to be, and maybe the change comes in that you have a really meaningful connection in the morning. You had breakfast together and you had a really stimulating conversation. That might be the change that then makes you feel a little more open and connected, and therefore more interested in erotic.
Yeah, I would get, and I do get relentlessly curious about sort of the private sex life of the individual, even like outside of the couple, because sometimes there is, like I'll have clients that talk to me about they have this like amazing Thursday morning with their vibrator, like on a regular basis, like they have a date with their vibrator on Thursday morning, and then like kind of really bad sex with their partner.
Mm-hmm.
And I get curious, like what's happening there on your Thursday morning? And it has also to do with all sorts of things. Like, first of all, it's Thursday morning. It's not Thursday night after I'm working all day and dealing with kids and I'm exhausted. It's Thursday morning. It's after I go to the gym. It's, I'm in like this, like, it's after I've showered. I feel really beautiful. Whatever those things are that are the
Yeah.
contextual cues for that person that allow them to open up in that Thursday morning are totally different than the contextual cues that are showing up when their partner wants to have sex
Yeah.
in the evening.
Like to their partner, they probably go better, right? Like the way that they touch, the pressure, the speed, and of course the time of day, and some of those things. But like if you know your body well, if you know what you like personally, it's going to inform in a really helpful way the partnership. And I find that partners really appreciate actually getting that input, unless they have a huge ego. But most of the time, they appreciate some direction.
So this leads to another question, which was from somebody that's been in a relationship for years. And let me pull it up on my phone. I had a group text going here. I opened it up to a group of women. My only question was, what questions do you have for a sex therapist? And they just came flooding,
Oh, I love
flooding in. I get that. This person said, I get that. Desire's present, but after many years with the same partner, it's oddly hard, a little embarrassing maybe, for me to say, let's get wild, try XYZ. So we end up having sex in the same position, same ways that are good. They work, but
it. So it's then I'm asking them to take a risk and ask for something different, right? And that feels like thrilling, and it also feels probably kind of frightening, but ask for something different. There's resources, there's card decks. Esther Perel has a great card deck. There's one called the Adventure series or something that's by another sex therapist. There are tools that can facilitate that, that can give you some fun ideas if you can't like totally brainstorm on your own. But I'm gonna wager that if you ask your partner to do something different, it will feel thrilling to them. Maybe it'll feel scary too, but it's a good thing. You know, you have to take a risk.
again, what happens in the bedroom may be what's happening in life too, because you also may be not doing a lot of different things in your life either. And that kind of psychological richness that can enhance just our life feeling vibrant and energized can translate into the bedroom as well, for
Yeah.
sure.
I mean, sex is so sensory focused. You know, it's like you're tasting, you're smelling, you're hearing, you're touching. So, yeah, it's like that matters. And so, if you're in a different environment, if there's different music, if there's, different smells, candles, whatever, body fluids, whatever, it all affects the experience, right? It's not just like it's the same, hopefully, it's not the same experience every time. But if there's some variables, it enriches it.
So, one of the things about our trip to Costa Rica is that your table, so when we go on these retreats, we get to sit where we want at lunch, and we'd have 3 meals together where we just talk.
Yeah.
These
That was the
meals.
best part.
So lovely. The best part, right? And your table was always packed. So as soon as people learned that you were a sex therapist, there was, I remember at one point, there was a single guy who was like just there all ears listening in, right? There was me. There was another person who'd just gone through a divorce and was really interested in what does this mean for them, like starting their sex life over in their 40s and actually doing it how they want to do it, right? And also scared at the same time too, like what that looks like. We all want to learn and we want to know. There's so much that we don't know because we're basing a lot of our knowledge on outdated information. I went to Catholic school, so my sex ed
Right.
was, I remember putting the condom on the banana. I remember being told about the social rhythm method, that it doesn't work. And I remember being told the one guarantee, if you do not want to get pregnant, abstinence. That was it. I'm like, okay, I know how to put a condom on a banana and I know about abstinence. Somewhere in there, something's supposed to happen, right? So there's so much that we don't know. And then we also get shaped by our early experiences,
Yeah.
right? These like your college partner who taught you about how to do a certain thing that you're still kind of doing with your partner now.
Right.
It's like outdated information.
Right. You're like, here's my moves. I got my whole moves. I do the same moves.
They worked for him or her or them. Okay.
Right.
So given all of that, what is the most common thing that comes in your office, and how do you work with people to get to this place of more exploration and vibrancy and feeling good in their sex life for the long run?
People definitely carry shame. Like that is just a thing, and definitely if there's a religious overlay, that's a correlative. But people come in with shame. They have body shame. They have sound. They feel weird about how they sound, how they look, how they taste, how they smell. Like they're just worried of rejection. And that happens so seldom. Most of the time, partners are just thrilled to be on board, and they're thinking about their own stuff too. I find that a lot of women feel self-conscious with receiving oral sex. That tends to come up, fairly frequently of like, "Ooh, I'm not sure, like I want it, but I don't know, like I feel it's too vulnerable, or it makes me feel self-conscious, or that kind of thing." And so sometimes you need to know your partner a little bit better so you feel more comfortable. Or if there's certain obstacles that are going to help, like make sure the door is locked if you have kids, or maybe you want to turn the lights down or whatever, then get those things in place so that your system can be present and open to new experiences.
Yeah, body shame is a big one. Certainly body image is one that I've worked with a lot. Where, I mean, if we think about that sort of dual process theory around sex, like you need to be aroused, and then you also need your break to be off. Like they kind of both those have to be at the same time. Because sometimes we can be aroused
Yeah.
with our break on. That's fine. That means you're like interested, something's, sexually stimulating to you, but you're able to contain. And then, but we
Yeah.
also need to be able to take that break off. And when we have body image stuff, I see it all the time where they'll like clients will say, like, I get so self-conscious about my stomach, or even just as you were saying, like there's like a disgust factor that is from their history and from our culture and purity culture around sex that can really mess with you when you're trying to let go. And we need that let go.
I was
Yeah.
actually just thinking this on one of my recent trips. I was at the airport and I noticed, they call it feminine hygiene product, whatever. And I'm like, why is it called feminine hygiene? Like the idea that that women need to be cleaned, right? It is so ingrained in our culture of like that we're unclean somehow, right? And if we have any scent, or if we have, any wetness or whatever, it's like so dumb because it's not true.
Hmm.
But that is learned. That is learned information. That is not fact.
Yeah. And then you layer in trauma. And
Mhm.
now we have a whole lot of more things that, I've had clients that have talked to me about difficulty with orgasm, in part because they described it as when they're having sex, they feel like there's like numbing cream over their whole body and they just can't feel anything. Right. There's just all these layers, like there's cultural stuff, but then there's also like deep psychological
Yeah.
aspects to that what shows up for us in our sex life that needs to be tended to as well.
Yeah, I kind of separate it where there's the biological, which is hormones, which is blood pressure, which is, say you've got scar tissue there from a surgery, that type of thing, right? There's all those things that come into play that are medical. There's the psychological, which is trauma, certainly, depression, anxiety, feelings of worthlessness, body image, all the stuff that kind of takes you out in your own mind. And then there's the interpersonal, right? What's happening between you and your partner. And all three can be present, right? There's lots of factors. There's two people or more, but there's usually two people at play. And so there's just a lot going on. And so understanding your own process and your own obstacles and your own chatter is going to be really important to have it go better.
That's super helpful. So that's like a biopsychosocial model.
Yeah.
And there's a spiritual component too, right? Like if
Yeah.
you wanted to add the biopsychosocial spiritual, how can, like that bigger connection that you can feel, the awe
Yeah.
space that people can feel when they're having sex.
Well, like in that
Yeah.
space, when you let go and you just feel completely seen and known, and you're just going after, like allowing yourself to give into to pleasure. That is kind of a spiritual experience.
That's sort of another interesting component because when I've worked with folks that have like say they have ED or they have erectile dysfunction or they're having difficulty with having an orgasm,
Mhm.
it is like it's like a brain. It's not that you're not touching the right spot. Maybe you are not. Like maybe there's some like mechanical stuff, but for the most part, and you correct me on this, like for the most part, what I see is more of it's a mental aspect that's putting a brake on this. And how we get to that place of letting go is probably addressing yes, the biological, but the psychological
So much of it,
things.
yeah, and with ED especially, is anxiety. It's
Yeah.
just they're just so afraid. It's hard to feel. I mean, excitement and fear kind of do run on the same channel, but it's the body is physically responding to what's happening in the mind, and if the mind is experiencing fear and anxiety, performance anxiety, or you know, social anxiety, or whatever's happening between you, the blood's going to drain out of your penis. And then it gets like it's a reinforcing cycle, right? I try to get couples to stay with it, do something else, pivot, continue to be in that space, don't abandon the whole effort, because then it just makes it even more loaded next time, right? Just stay present, stay with the touching. There's a lot of the sensory is all still there, even if it's not erect, it still feels good. So it's not like you should abandon the effort. You just stay present, and it tells the mind, hey, it's okay. No matter what happens, you're okay.
Yeah.
And it tends
So
to
it
come
goes,
back online.
yeah, it goes both ways where there's expectations around, um, women and cleanliness and, all of those things
Mhm.
that can be blockages to having good sex. And then there's all the expectations around men that
Yeah.
sex has to be penetration or sex has to be, you know, the expectation around you have to have if you're in a heterosexual relationship or in any relationship, the other person has to have an orgasm. Those are all like the cultural stuff
Yeah.
that we carry that I think we don't even like we're swimming in it. We don't even know that we're carrying it. And
But
also I'm hesitant
redefining
because
sex, right? Like sex is sexuality. It's the whole gamut of pleasure seeking, exchange and behavior. And like lesbian couples they have the highest level of satisfaction. And if you think about that, that's like, wait, why? There's not even necessarily penetration happening. Well, that's because they spend more time and they aren't so focused on penetrative orgasm, which is like so basic, right? But
yeah.
there's lots of erogenous zones. I mean, we talk about this in the pleasure circle. There's lots of ways to please the body. And if you're not so singular focused, it can really help.
So that was a question that one of my male clients asked.
Yeah. What?
He said, I want to know everything about what women do together
Yeah. Hmm.
because they figured something out,
We have
right?
enough time for
Um,
that?
yeah.
Well, when I was doing my research for my dissertation, which was on lesbian sex therapy, it looked at like women spend a lot more time on the process, right? The It's an elongated foreplay, I guess it would be. So there's lots of touching, there's lots of holding, there's lots of kissing, there's also more talking, that kind of thing. So women need more time typically to get their bodies online to have a physiological response. And so that being lengthened is helpful. Also, most of the time, I mean, I think about 20 to 30% of women can have penetrative orgasms, depending on kind of how your clitoris is structured. And so the clitoral orgasm is really going to be your better bet. And that doesn't require penetration. That requires pressure on the clitoral area. And so women together can do that quite easily,
Right.
obviously. Oral sex can do it too, but body to body, it doesn't, it just is easier. Again, orgasm is not necessarily the goal. Pleasure is the goal, because I can look like a lot of things. So I think also the reframe is helpful.
Okay. So we're going to spend a little time on the clitoris because this was something that was mind blowing to me when I was a biopsych student. And so we
Mhm.
did do a lot of like stuff around human development. And when I learned that the clitoris and the penis are from the same tissue
Mhm.
in utero,
Yeah.
and then this tissue either develops based on whatever the hormonal environment of that what's happening in utero, the tissue develops into a penis or it develops into a clitoris, and then that the clitoris, what we think of as the clitoris, is just it's sort of like the glands of the penis. It's just like the top that's sticking out,
Yeah.
and I feel like if you for that is really maybe in a relationship, in a lesbian relationship, you understand that you're like that really
Mhm.
sensitive part sticking out. So be really sensitive to it. Whereas I think that that is also like part of the understanding of the body, right? That there's so much to these parts of the body. We understand the penis a lot more than we understand the vagina.
Because we're all male, with so many male researchers.
So many male researchers. And one of the things that you carried around in Costa Rica was your bag, Viva the Vulva.
Uh-huh.
Spark some conversations. But this is also part of it, the
Mhm.
educational aspects of getting to know your body, your partner's body, getting to know these parts, what they're like, how what's sensitive, what's not, what hurts, because you're
Yeah.
not going to want it if it hurts or it's
Yeah.
boring in the wrong spot.
Or not
Yeah,
having organisms, and they don't know why, right? They don't
exactly.
understand sort of the structure. And I didn't understand this for a long time until I did, until I, took anatomy and understood kind of like the full picture. I mean, I was, sort of exploring it before I really had all the information to back it up. And I was like, oh, that's what's happening. I'll tell you just kind of quickly, like, right, if this is the vulva
Yes.
and the clitoris is up here, like there's glands, right? There's sensory, most of the nerve endings are on the outside anyway. So the little wishbone shape penetration happens here. And so obviously most women feel it mostly on the as it's going in. It's not so much an internal process, but in part they're having orgasms because either their partner can go up high enough to make contact with their clitoris, or the nerve endings, which are actually just these are the legs of the clitoris, are coming down in here. And so they're sensing it down here. So it's technically still the clitoral orgasm. It's just it's an internal one. But it's all a matter of too, like, how prominent is your clitoris? They can be like little baby carrots. Like they can
Right.
be like bigger, or they might be really flat and kind of hidden under that hood. So it's just different bodies are going to be more or less sensitive.
Right. And who was ever, I mean, we know a whole lot about, our ears and our eyes and our hearts, how our hearts pump. I mean, I could ask my fifth grader, how does your heart pump? And he could tell you all sorts of things about the blood going in and out and what it does, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we're like, what? What is this that you're pointing to and describing? So if folks were wanting to get more information about just their own anatomy, how would this exploration go? Or what do you recommend?
I actually downloaded this awesome book that some beautiful person created called This is a Vulva. I got it off Etsy and I used some of the graphics from it. I licensed it. And it's just like it shows different pictures of all different looks and shapes and sizes and colors of vulvas. It also shows the anatomy in detail with all the call outs. Yeah, I would say you could look there.
Go look there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can we get that from you? Is that on your website? Is that
I don't know that I'm not allowed to really resell
okay?
it.
Okay, maybe
And you
that's
could
on
go,
Etsy.
yeah,
But
go
what
to
you
Etsy.
can get on Jenn Kennedy's website
Yeah.
is cookie cutters
Oh, yes. I commission those.
to make
3D printer
yes,
erotic cookie cutters.
erotic cookie cutters. So if you want to ice some boobs,
Yeah, we've got cookie
that's what you can
cutters.
download
We've got
there.
the Viva La Velva totes.
Yeah,
Yeah, we've got, all
yeah,
kinds of things.
that is so funny. Okay, going back to my text stream here. This is the text stream that you hope your children never open ever.
Right. Like, what?
Or maybe you do. Maybe you hope they open it and they learn a little bit. Okay, so wow, this was a quite an essay. Quote, I have a friend. This isn't me, but this is actually a true friend of mine. So I have a friend who was married for many years to a husband who was emotionally and physically neglectful. There was no physical or emotional intimacy for years. She wasn't validated as as sexually desirable. Now that she's out of the relationship and divorce, there are many opportunities for validation and physical intimacy. She craves this, and yet she fears it will be self-sabotaging. What's the protocol for her and the thousands of other people who are bravely leaving their partners? How do
Yeah.
you do it when you're, starting out again, dating again after so many years?
And it's so different, right? The mindset and the experience and the relationship to body is so different when you're 40 or 50 than it was when you were 20 and 25, right? So if you've been in a marriage and you're sort of starting over, I definitely see clients in that space. And what I love about working with older clients is just hopefully there's like a certain amount of like, you don't get caught up in all the like small stuff. You can let some of that go, some of the body stuff or some of the, but you're discerning in who you're partnering with, but you're also prioritizing your own pleasure, right? You're not in there to please. This isn't a job interview. This is like hey, we're both in this because we both want something good out of this. And so the relationship matters, but so does the sex, right? Ask for what you want. Know what you want. You got to know what you want first. Then you got to ask for it.
Yeah, I mean, knowing my friend,
Mhm.
I think there's the concern about like she's so hungry
Mhm.
to finally have a good relationship that she may let too many people in
Mhm.
almost, right? But at the same time, she deserves to go out and experiment and have lots of relationships and be
Mhm.
free, right? And it's just that, I mean, this is also maybe also somewhat of our experience in our 20s and teens of like,
Yeah.
where's that line? Like, I want to coach my teens on this too, right? Not just my
No,
divorced
right?
friends.
Like, I like
Yeah.
sometimes I've done this before where I put together like a dating plan almost for clients
Hmm.
because it's like they go crazy if they've been so starved for so long, right?
Yeah.
And then they're just like, I want it all. But
Right.
what I would say is, I don't care if you want to date. I don't care if you want to sleep with multiple people. Just be safe. And then also make sure that you're giving consent each time, like that you're in it and you want to be in it. And if at some point you don't, then eject, right? You don't have to stay present. You don't have to like do something you don't want. And if it doesn't feel good, then it is a risk to speak up and say, I don't like how you're doing that, or I'd rather you do something different, or, you know, it's like, ugh, if you've never done that before, it feels incredibly weird and foreign, but
Yeah.
so empowering. It's like a muscle that you just need to build.
And then also listening for the whole body no, because I think that's also part of what, even if you've been in a long-term relationship, as you were talking about earlier, like maybe there's stuff that's going on there that you've had a whole body no for years
Hmm.
and you've overridden it. And I would say probably for this friend, like, there's been whole body no's.
Yeah.
And that's also part of this, like that's part of finding pleasure again.
It is like a sensory experience being intimate. And also, trying new things can feel scary. And so sometimes it's a little bit hard to know if you're scared or
Yeah.
if it's a no, right? Like what's happening, just the excitement can also feel like fear. So recognizing that something maybe puts you out of your comfort zone or maybe makes you feel a little more vulnerable, or like that's just risk. That's okay. Versus like, I don't like this and I don't want this. That's a very different feeling.
That's
And
so good. That's
can
so
you
good to pay attention to.
can you
Yes.
negotiate with your partner to say, this is how it would feel better for me, right? Rather than just a hard shutdown, say this is what I'd like instead, or could you, touch me here? Give them a redirect. Give them somewhere to go. Because if you cut the energy off, then it starts to feel like this like heavy thing between you. But if you can give them guidance, then it's gonna go better and it keeps you both invested, you know?
Yeah, that languaging is really important of how you tell. I mean, even if it's something like you don't want to have sex tonight, what is the specific languaging you would use around that if so that you're not like rejecting your partner or that they don't feel like they're doing it wrong?
Mm-hmm.
Like, do you have any STEM statements for those of us that need like tell us exactly what to say, sex therapist, so we
Yeah.
don't hurt their
So
feelings?
it's like, sometimes it can be nonverbal, right? Sometimes it's a hand redirect. Like you take the
Yes.
hand, part of sensate focus, which is an exercise I give to a lot of couples who are trying to kind of go back into sex and have really been apart for a while. And I think it's level 2, includes handwriting. So like one hand, like your hand is on yourself and then your partner's hand is on top so they can see how you move, right? So that gesture can also be used when you're physically together. So maybe it's like, hands go on the hips and, you give a grab, or maybe it moves to whatever part feels good to you, but it's giving some guidance non-verbally. Or you could say, I love this. And you know what I love more? Or, you know, this, it's hard, right? It starts to go into dirty talk and everyone goes cringe. But if you can even
I
just
don't know.
say,
Some people aren't cringing right now, Jen. They're like loving the handwriting. They're like, this is great. Say
well,
more.
it's fine. During Pleasure Circle, my small group, I definitely bring up dirty talk, and everyone's like, "Ugh, I don't do that." I'm like, what? Come on, we should do it, but like, whatever, fine. Okay, so let's do it like a
This is shoulds from the sex therapist. You
baby
should be talking
version
dirty.
of dirty talk, which could
Yeah.
be, I really like that, or oh my gosh, that feels so good, right? Then it's just a compliment or it's an encouragement. That also makes your partner's brain go, "Woo, yay, I'm getting it right. I'm going to do more of that." It's so empowering. Um, the next level would be like, you know, asking for something, which might feel like out of your zone.
Yeah.
But I will say again, hearing is part of what turns the brain on, so much of it. And so if you're moaning, or if you're yumming even in your own way, or you're indicating, maybe you're digging your fingernails into them or something oh, like that is like a little signal, this is working and let's do more of this, and enhances, it's a reinforcing cycle between the two of you.
Right. Reinforce, shape the things that you want more of.
Yeah.
And we can practice that. We can learn it. Okay, I want to give you another question from the peanut gallery here. Okay, this one is about orgasms. How to cultivate the sexy spark and satisfaction with changing midlife bodies and orgasms that are suddenly lighter and lazier from a former earth-shattering experience. So, yeah, this is more about like just changing bodies as we age. And
Yeah.
there's so much. Okay, first of all, there's so much stigma and messaging out there around aging and even sex and aging. I mean, we think about there's like, ew, gross, old people kissing, there's
Yeah.
there's like an ick that we're kind of socialized around. And then we're also socialized around this belief that as we get older, we're just not going to want sex. We're not going to be as sexy. Um, but actually, I find that a lot of the people that I work with in their 40s, the women that I work with,
Yeah.
have a new boost of sexual energy, and it is like it's exciting to see. I mean, that's us in Costa Rica, and we're like out there swimming in the ocean, and we
Yeah.
feel phenomenal and beautiful, and we see other people as beautiful. You should have seen Jen in her red
I,
bathing suit. Let me just say that.
I just want to tell you too, before we went and you said we swim every day. I was like, I'm not swimming every day. I was like, I'm not going in the ocean. First of all, my hair color will wash out and I'll look all like disheveled. I'll have to redo my hair every day. And then I completely gave into it and I just did it. Like it was so great.
And you looked amazing and felt amazing. I mean, we felt amazing. That
It
was,
really
yeah,
is. It's like that
so good.
sensory experience.
Yeah,
Going
swimming.
back to the question though, I just want to revisit
Okay,
that because I will say this is a common thing of like orgasms do change as we age for women.
bummer.
And sometimes I think what she was describing is kind of like what I would call like a more shallow orgasm,
Yeah,
where it isn't like the whole body isn't like involved, or it kind of you kind of get there and it like feels good, but it doesn't feel like it doesn't go through your whole um, body. Sometimes that can be a function of pelvic floor. So your pelvic floor might be too tight. So you might want to check in with a pelvic floor therapist because sometimes that can be a function of that. It's not just like goodbye orgasms. It might be that, either your pelvic floor needs to be strengthened or it needs to be loosened. It needs to be like, some pressure needs to be off of it. Just check with your medical provider and see if maybe something's going on in your pelvic floor. Your primary care probably won't know. It's really a pelvic floor specialty kind of thing.
the clients that I have referred to pelvic floor specialists have like come back saying this changed my life. Like
Yeah.
I had no idea. This was amazing. And I refer them for all sorts of reasons, for pain during sex, or, this can be like 15 years postpartum.
Yeah.
And I was shocked to hear my sister-in-law lives in Paris, and they prescribe pelvic floor therapy. Like they come to your house after you have a baby and they work on your pelvic floor.
Yeah.
Everybody gets it.
So
Now,
civilized.
it may be in part to these French men that want an intact pelvic floor. But besides that, it's still good. There.
For tissue, or if you,
Yeah.
those issues, whatever. There's lots of issues that can happen after. And oftentimes I feel like women are cleared too soon for sex post pregnancy. The body is holding and guarding and it doesn't want it. And if that doesn't get honored, then it can lengthen, that guarding can continue.
Yeah. And then the second part of that is, okay, even if your orgasm's getting lazier and lighter, there's other good things about aging and sex. I don't know. I just like all the body image stuff. There is a thing that I think we have the capability to let go of as we age, like the self-consciousness, and the wanting more of that connection and closeness. There's so much good stuff, I think,
Yeah.
that is possible for us in our sex lives as we age. And so we need to not listen to those scary stories about aging and sex and women's bodies in particular,
Yeah.
because there's definitely messaging that men get more distinguished and women just get, useless. And we gotta challenge some of those.
And I remember, okay, years ago when I lived in LA, I took this S Factor was what it was called. It was a pole dancing class that lasted. I took 6 months of it, right? So there was like a
Cool.
series of it. And it was so interesting. There was a dance that we all learned and it was really actually quite physical too, because climbing those poles was like hard. But what I noticed in that, because there is a factor of like striptease, but it wasn't like to nakedness. It was, but there were all different shapes and sizes in my class. And what I noticed is it was so much sexier to have a woman that just felt embodied. And oftentimes, actually, the more, I would say, Rubenesque figures were sexier sometimes because there was just, I don't know, there was very womanly, but it was really about the confidence that was exuded, how you owned your body and how you owned your presence. And I think we've all seen women like that, right? There's coming into the room in that, and then there's like the stuff that everybody else does, you know? And
Right.
so confidence is the sexiest thing ever.
That is so true. That is so true. And confidence, not confidence from an embodied, I know my body, I'm in my body, I feel my body,
Yeah. I
sensory,
deserve. I
I
deserve
deserve, yeah,
to know that
all
I'm
of that is
beautiful and
so,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, that is so sexy. And the clients that I have that are in satisfied relationships, I mean, I have like clients in their late 60s and they describe their partners as like grabbing them in the kitchen and like they just love, like they're just so into them and they are so into themselves too. Like in it,
Oh,
like, yeah, grab this. I've good stuff. And
yeah.
it has nothing to do with wrinkles or belly fat.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with that at all. And
Yeah.
I want that. Like that's what I want long term.
Hmm.
You know, I all the efforts to try and keep it all contained may actually make us have less good sex lives in some ways.
Absolutely. The chatter that goes on in your mind, spectatoring is what we call it, where you're like a spectator of your life and you're just, it's so distracting. It takes you out of the moment, certainly out of the sexual moment, but out of many moments, right? If you're comparing yourself to all the other women in the room, if you're preoccupied with your imperfection, yeah, it's a setup and it's not going to take you to a positive place sexually.
So you take women through this process in the groups that you lead, and tell us a little bit about like what you do for women, what these groups are, what an experience would be
Yeah.
like if they want to be part of
So
it.
this is sort of a culmination of like, so I used to teach human sexuality and then I did my PhD in sexology. And this is sort of a boiled down curriculum that I've created that is different than the therapeutic process. So the group work is so empowering. I love it because the women really like reinforce um, and just echo and validate one another. But it's a 6-week program, and each week is 90 minutes. And I have like a little mini lecture prepared. So I'd start with that. Then I give some writing prompts, and then we talk about it. And you know, the topics are starts with like history, looking at sort of where did you come from? What are the messages? What is the soup you're swimming in? Then we look at anatomy. Then we look at attachment. We talk about toys. We talk about, you know, just kind of what, like all the various facets. And people sometimes bring in questions. Definitely, you know, there's always a topic of structure, but then there's some loose, you know, space to process that too. So it's been transformational. I mean, the women are so close at the end, and I'm actually going to introduce this now for couples because I've got some
Oh,
couples that
rad.
really they want to do it with their partner. So if
That's rad. Yeah.
get the couples to be in the room at the same time as another couple, right? They're so afraid of men talking in
Oh
front
my
of them.
gosh.
They're like, ah! You know, women are like fine with it.
Women are, yeah, they're like, bring it on. Yeah, they
Yeah.
can take all those men down, but okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I'm also working on doing a recorded version so that those who are super shy that are like, I can't
Good.
talk in front of
You
other
can just
people, you
be
know,
voyeuristic watching the whole thing. Yeah.
right, right. I know. I'm like, come on, get in the
Are
crew.
these online? Are these in person? Like how are these
So
groups
far, they've all
run?
been online.
Online, great. So if
Not
you're
most,
anywhere, you can do it. Yeah,
but
great.
that's the idea is that anybody can
But that makes
do.
it safer sometimes for people. You know, like we're not in the same room. We're not like going to dinner afterwards. We don't have to walk out of the room together.
Mhm. Well, and
Just
sometimes
turn off
people are
our
like, can I
computer.
see who else
Yeah.
is on the list because I want to make sure I don't know anybody. And I'm like, that's
Oh,
fine. You know, let's
yeah.
make sure build safety for you. But yeah,
Yeah,
I just think there's something magical about the group experience. I think it's transformational
totally.
and affirming and connecting and in this way that is different than therapy.
Yeah, because we all want to know what other people, we want to know, are we normal?
Mhm.
And then we start to realize normal is such a huge category that we are all normal. Like it's so big. It's like, is my nose normal? Well, I don't know. Like, look at all the noses there are in the world. Of course it's
Right.
normal. So am I normal? People want to know, am I having enough sex? Am I having too much sex? Which includes that big category. Because imagine if you ask that group of people, you get like this huge, vast variety of answers as to what's satisfying for them in terms
Yeah.
of how much they want. You know, I have clients that want to have sex twice a week. I have clients that want to have sex once a month. I have clients that just are okay with not having sex, you know, for a while. It's like
Yeah.
that's okay. That's all
Yeah.
normal. So we want to feel not alone and we want to feel normal. And then we also just want to know, like, are there things that we can do to make it better? And because you're a sex therapist and you have all this experience and you have the science and the knowledge and the life experience, you can give some ideas. Like there are things you can do.
Well, and there's something too, I mean, this is in the therapeutic process too, just naming it, unpacking it, like saying, this is the thing I'm afraid to say. This is the thing that like, kind of preoccupies me. And once you
Yeah.
say it, it's like it takes some of the charge out of it. And then we can actually work on it. And I can give you some ideas about, or we collectively can. It just, yeah, it's like nothing is actually that hard or crazy, really.
We'll end on that. Nothing's that hard or crazy, really. That's good.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Jenn Kennedy. I will put all of your information in the show notes. People will come check out those groups. And also, Jenn has a podcast, The Pleasure Project, that you can listen to her answer all sorts of questions about relationships and sex and bodies and pleasure. And it's super great. And it was also just really nice to get to know you in a personal way, but also in this professional realm as well. You opened us up a little bit on this podcast to a new territory that we haven't explored yet. So
I love
thank
it.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Wise Effort podcast. Wise Effort is about you taking your energy and putting it in the places that matter most to you. And when you do so, you'll get to savor the good of your life along the way. If you would like to become a member of the Wise Effort podcast, go to wiseeffort.com. And if you like this episode and think it would be helpful to somebody, please leave a review over at Podchaser or call me at 805-457-2776. I would like to thank my team, my partner in all things, including the producer of this podcast, Craig, Ashley Hyatt, the podcast manager, and Yoko Nguyen, who is the social media manager. And thank you to Ben Gold at Bell and Branch for our new music. This podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only, and it's not meant to be a substitute for mental health treatments.